Approve.
Move to approve by whom?
Ms. Kelly.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Item number 3, review and approval of the PAG's draft fiscal year 22 through 26 Transportation Improvement Program, our TIP. Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
the agenda item is the overall work program. And Jamie will give you an overview, and we have a couple other staff members that are going to provide additional information.
I apologize. I printed up the wrong. I grabbed the wrong one. I have the other one here.
That's
Correct.
okay. With
Yes.
your permission, we'll have staff give the overview and then a couple presentations, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some information about the fiscal year 22 and 23 overall work program. As Mr. Mohini said, I'll be providing the introduction, and then Josh Pope and Hens will be providing additional information. So just by way of an overview, the OWP is a statement of work or scope of work known in the regulations as the Unified Planning Work Program. It is a federal requirement, but PAG has referred to it as the overall work program for many years, and is required as the basis of a contract with ADOT. It consists not only of our transportation planning programs for the region, but also other programs and their respective goals. The OWP must be approved by ADOT and is in effect for 24 months beginning on July 1st. So in terms of the organization of the document, it includes an introduction and regional planning background and overview section, and that includes background on PAG. It discusses our Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, designation, as well as the designation as a transportation management area, our federal planning factors and emphasis areas, as well as different steps in the OWP development process. Chapters of the OWP include transportation activities, integrated planning and smart regions. Sorry, it's a little small on my screen. I had to squint. I'm going to blow that up. Other programs and services, RTA support, pass-through partnerships, administration, and an appendices section. And the appendices include a functional organizational chart. It includes a section on the highlights from the current term of the OWP, fiscal years 20 and 21. It includes a table of the federal planning factors and emphasis areas as they compare to the different work elements in our OWP. And finally, it also includes a section on the different budget tables. So within the OWP, there are actually 18 different work elements. And for each work element, we describe the purpose of the work element, the different funding sources, the projected outcomes and estimated completion dates for those outcomes, as well as goals and strategies to achieve those outcomes. The OWP includes 6 different budget tables for each fiscal year. So table 1, I'm going to show the fiscal year 22 tables just for illustrative purposes. But table 1 is the funds available or anticipated revenues. That includes federal sources at the top, followed by state in the middle, and then local sources at the bottom. Table 2 shows the local share contributions by our member agencies. And these are critical for PAG to ensure that we can meet the different match requirements, the non-federal share match requirements for the federal and state funds we receive. And it's important to note that these contributions are not increasing. Table 3 is similar to Table 1. It shows the total revenue, but it breaks it out by all of the 18 work elements. So it shows the different federal, state, and local sources by work element. Table 4 shows the total expenditures by program area and category. Again, broken down by the 18 different work elements, showing, for example, personnel expenditures, employee-related expenditures, office, etc. Table 5 shows the staff allocation by program area for the full-time equivalent values of those different broad categories. And you can see for fiscal year 22, we anticipate budgeting 55.5 FTEs. And finally, table 6 shows the capital equipment and consultants, including pass-through funding. And this is inclusive of all those different elements of $5,000 or greater in anticipated cost. And for fiscal year 22, there are actually two pages of that table. So it's important to note that the OWP forms the basis of an agreement with ADOT, between PAG and ADOT. And this implementation agreement describes the various roles and responsibilities of each entity, including topics such as billing, procurement, etc. And although the OWP is a federal requirement, ADOT has primary responsibility for administering FHWA and FDA funds allocated to the MPO and ensuring that such funds are expended for eligible costs, purposes, and activities. Also, it's important to note that sometimes PAG is asked by other organizations to get involved in new projects and initiatives. However, if it's not an eligible activity and not reflected in the agreement with ADOT, we cannot do it. And the content of the OWP is largely guided by our federal and state requirements or other contractual commitments. So in terms of priorities for the next 2 fiscal years, as outlined in the draft OWP, the RTA plan and developing the next RTA plan are top priorities. So the voter-approved 20-year plan will sunset in 2026, and so focus continues to be on delivering on the promises to voters, whether that's through the TIP or the long-range plan or other activities. Meanwhile, the process is underway to develop the next RTA plan. In September, the Regional Council approved the 2045 Regional Mobility and Accessibility Plan, or RMAP. That was the update. And it's important to note that this long-range transportation plan is required to be consistent with the balance of the current RTA plan. And so that's why RMAP development for 2024 adoption is another priority. During the next 2 fiscal years, we'll begin the process to develop this next long-range transportation plan. As always, fulfilling any obligations due to contract or federal and or state mandates is another priority. And finally, data and technical tools to support all of these efforts is another priority for the next 2 fiscal years. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to take questions now on what I covered, but also happy to take questions at the end after Josh Pope and Ken Sue present. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, as Jamie mentioned, we do want to have a couple more presentations for you, and that's really focusing on data collection and modeling and basically the backbone of everything we do. So if there are no other questions, I believe Josh was going to go first. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Hi, Carmine DeBona. So I just wanted to see if I should hold questions, Farhad, on the subsequent presentations. Do they pertain to the overall work plan? Or
yes, they do. It's just additional information about those priorities that Jamie was just talking about.
Okay, I'll hold my questions until we get through those presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is Artemio. I also have a couple of questions, but I'll wait till after the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Artemio and Carmine. All right, so Joshua, you're up next.
Thank you. I am now controlling Crystal's screen. Great. Let me see this. Okay, there we are. Good morning, Chairman Rozema and members of the committee. I'm Josh Pope, Technical Services Administrator at PAG. I'm excited to present to you some of our existing data applications that our technical services team plans on enhancing in the upcoming OWP in support of RTA, RTA Next, and the RMAP update. First one I'm going to touch on is the PAC Safety Explorer. At PAG, we recognize that safety is a concern across all planning and programming efforts. We have integrated state-of-the-art safety performance functions, SPFs, throughout all of our tools. This tool supports a deeper focus on safety-related issues. The PAC Safety Explorer platform was developed in-house and initially deployed summer of 2018 in support of the HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, statewide competitive call for projects. That effort resulted in the awarding of $11 million federal safety funds for our region. This tool allows for network screening of 16 selected incident characteristics via the interactive charting and tabular metrics on the right, which are integrated with the mapping features on the left. The platform allows for authorized regional partners to create custom project extents facilitating ad hoc reporting to support the analysis of existing conditions and incident characteristics of the safety features on our streets. Users can then save the project extent and related reports to support project development or submittal of funding applications. This password-protected platform has supported safety analysis for 70 partners from jurisdictions across the region, members of our private sector transportation engineering community, and recently members of local law enforcement. In April of 2021, last month, the site supported 19 active users. In 2019, the platform received Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE's Safety Council Edmund R. Stricker Organization Award for outstanding contribution to safety. So we're very proud of this platform, but 2019 was an eon ago. So what have you done? What have we done for you lately? In the upcoming OWP, we're preparing to enhance this platform to help support the upcoming HIP call for projects and make improvements based on user feedback that we've received over the last 3 years. Some additional enhancements include, but are not limited to, the SPF scatterplot interaction with mapped incidents and network facilities. So this is what an SPF looks like for a 4-leg signalized intersection. So we take all of those facilities in our region and we plot them out against the approach volumes and the expected crashes to see which ones are performing poorly and which ones are performing better against their group of like facilities. Some additional enhancements are going to be tabular filtering and incident selection via published map services. So any of the data layers that we have in the map, we're able to have more control over. Bulk safety assessment of published map layers. So where we have a layer of hawk locations, we can go and assess all of those at once and do that annually. That then rolls into a before and after project safety assessment. So we know what the conditions are before we look to put it in a proposed project. So being able to hold that and track it to look at post implementation assessment. And we're also looking at exploring, excuse me, better integration with Crash Modification Clearinghouse, the CMF Clearinghouse, and explore integration with ADOT licensed INRIX real-time speed and volume metrics and their archive. The next tool that I'm going to be presenting is the RTA Next Project Portal. In December 2019, we deployed RTA Next Portal. This is our most recent application compiling the best available regional network and intersection performance content, facilitating custom project level reporting that supports our performance-based planning. This platform enhances our previous work from the 2045 RMAP update to support the integration of performance measures into the project planning effort. Users are presented the underlying data of key metrics for system maintenance, safety, system performance, sidewalk status, environment, and freight. Partners can use this content to define a project extent and receive an ad hoc project level existing condition performance report of over 24 FAST Act aligned performance measures. This slide shows the project review page and the project level performance assessment grids that demonstrate the current performance for each project against our RMAP and FAST Act aligned measures. In the upcoming OWP, our in-house project team will continue to enhance this tool as we compile additional data sets related to right-of-way, utilities, and stormwater flows, and provide reporting and analysis to prepare for the detailed project assessment stage of the RTA Next effort. In addition to continuing to support our RTA Next exercise, this tool will provide the foundation for enhancements and improvements of our performance-based planning efforts in the new RMAP update for 2024. The next tool I'm going to present on is PAC's Green Infrastructure Prioritization Tool. This is a multidisciplinary home for green infrastructure related data sets since 2012. The 2008 LiDAR-derived tree canopy data establish our foundational understanding of 7% average tree canopy in our region for census blocks with more than 5 people or 5 employees. This 2008 dataset, along with U of A research surface temperature data, supported earlier tree planting campaigns and climate-related resolutions in our region. The more recent 2015 data displayed here was developed in-house, and the heat severity data developed in collaboration with U of A researchers are foundational data sets supporting current climate and green infrastructure initiatives in our region. The 2015 LULC land use lane classification data sets developed by Pima County Regional Flood Control District with support from the Lincoln Institute and the Chesapeake Conservancy leveraged PAG's regional ortho and LiDAR data to produce finer resolution calculations of impervious surface area. This content supports stormwater interest across the region. Our team is currently working on a 2019 update to the LULC, leveraging updated data sets from PAG's orthophoto program. The data has been processed in-house and is currently being reviewed with our regional partners. Products from our upcoming 2021 acquisition that my colleague Ben Hickson presented last month will support future updates to these products in the upcoming OWP. So turning that data into information. And the final data application I'm going to present to you is our Transview Regional Traveler Information System. Transview has been supported by PAG since 1997. In 2017, our in-house team developed and deployed the most recent iteration of the tool. We migrated it to support the cloud environment. We migrated it to the cloud environment, established automated data aggregation of all regional PSAP incident feeds into an open 511 format, integrated real-time congestion base map, National Weather Service radar feeds, Pima County Wash Road closure content, ADOT live traffic camera feeds, and construction event details. As part of the 2017 effort, we developed a PIO construction event data entry tool. This tool streamlines construction event data gathering and dissemination for our region. This allows authorized jurisdictional PIO and communications staff to enter in construction event details to be displayed at user-defined times. The PIOs, in return, receive press release documents with the same construction event details displayed in their organizational templates. We are currently averaging 150 construction events reported a year by our jurisdictional partners. More recently, in 2020, we finalized integration of our regionally aggregated content into the AZ 511 system. This is a two-way street. We push our regional content out and we pull ADOT's incidents and construction-related content in. While our local radio rebroadcasters are our most visible consumers of the traveler information, digital rebroadcasters such as Google, Waze, Bing, SiriusXM, and HERE also actively consume Transview data. Integration into AZ 511 further broadens the reach of the Transview content. In the upcoming OWP, our in-house team is preparing to enhance our PIO construction event tool, facilitating better integration with social media geotargeting and to support FHWA Work Zone Data Exchange WZDX schema. The social media enhancements are intended to provide more value to our jurisdictional PIO partners, and the schema alignment supports FHWA's WZDX efforts for industry standardization of traveler information exchange with future connected and autonomous vehicles. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point.
Any questions anybody wants to ask now or defer to the end of the final presentation? All right, having heard none, then we will move on to the final of the three. And who is presenting that one, Farhad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hansu is our manager for our traffic modeling team, and he'll be presenting on our active-based modeling. Go ahead, Hansu.
Hello, good morning. I want to just check and just the presentation and if I'm on or not. Okay, so now I have a control. Let me just double check if I'm going to, yeah, it's not working. Good morning, everyone. And my name is Hansino, Modeling Manager at PAC. Today, I will talk about the PAC's recent development of its active-based model called just the ABM in short, that will be used for long and short-range transportation planning. Introduction. In terms of understanding the ABM, I will give you an overview of the new model and the difference from the current travel demand model called the TDM. PAC ABM was rooted in the development of a mega region and the active-based model development in 2008. Last 18 months, and PAC worked toward an independent model considering PAC's model environment. But we still share the core of the mega regional and development component. And among several just the ABMs nationwide and PAC, PAC now uses the CT ramp 2, second generation of a CT ramp. The major difference comes from the population synthesizer and the tool-based activity choice model. On the diagram, and you will see that's just the first population synthesizer and generates 1 million population in household level. The second, long-term work and school location choice model. Third, the midterm mode choice model. The first, daily activity choice model, which forms tours and trips based on the linked daily activities. Fifth, trip assignment, assigning trips to the transportation network. ABM benefits. Above all, we realized some limitation in terms of applying the current TDM to our planning efforts. The current TDM offers less dynamic and less detailed travel behavior. The current TDM only considers the limited times of day, and all trips are unlinked to each other. No consideration of new mobility and e-commerce. The current TDM is not capable of handling autonomous vehicles, and it is limited to address emerging e-commerce, such as Amazon delivery. No work from home option. We realized work from home is an important factor, but the current model does not demonstrate the work from home options. So here's some expectations from our new activity-based model. Based on the TDM limitations listed above, we expect to use the activity-based model to improve planning options with final resolution travel behavior analysis and better support on new mobility and e-commerce. Provide advanced modeling linking together with the land use model and the dynamic traffic assignment model. For a long-term goal, we could also consider a PAC and MAC mega-regional activity-based model development. PAC conducted a virtual model peer review with 11 national ABM frontiers and practitioners in December 2020. During 3 continuous days, we split 3 major items for each day, including Tucson context, calibration validation, and sensitivity test, especially to focus on the proposed model is accurate and reliable in the regional questions. PAC provided detailed calibration and validation performance measures with around 150 performance measures, as you see here on your right side, and for the validation, and here on the bottom, as well as 25 different scenario test results, including TNC service, autonomous vehicle, roadway pricing, e-shopping, and land development. Peer review findings. During 3-day peer review, PAC team tried to answer the questions proactively, and the peer review team made a final and overall conclusion described here that PAC ABM is structurally sound with a reasonable runtime. Together with detailed calibration validation items, the panel recommended model data improvement, including household and the university travel survey, commercial vehicle and non-motorized model development, and MEC and PAC mega region development. Ongoing ABM enhancement. For ongoing ABM enhancement, we are going to improve our telecommute module, the freight model, and other components enhancement starting around July 2021. we have already completed some portions in-house, such as land use model and the activity-based model integration and a class count update. And we are working on other components, including airport model improvement. And we hope to complete this model enhancement by the end of this year. Thank you. And I have to answer if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes the presentation portion. And just to summarize the amount of data collection and the modeling effort that goes behind planning, we have a strong team of folks that do all that work. So thanks to Josh and Hansu for just giving you a taste of what kind of work they do. But a significant portion of what our staff do is typically the data collection, modeling, and the planning effort that you normally don't see until it's hopefully ready to be presented. So with that, all of us are available to answer questions. Jamie and Nathan are our lead folks on developing the OWP, and obviously Josh and Hansu are available to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mohimi, and thank you, Mr. No, Mr. Pope, and Mr. Brown for your presentations. We did have a couple of people who indicated they had questions right after the first presentation, so I'll go to those first. Mr. Devonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you, staff, for the presentations. Very informative. This is on the preparation of the overall work plan, and would like to hear from staff on the process that includes, or how does the process include coordination from member jurisdictions in developing the program? And then what is the step or steps that are used in incorporating that jurisdiction into the plan before it's submitted to ADOT and FHWA?
Sure, I'll start, and Jamie, feel free to chime in. So typically the process used to be annual. ADOT had requested to switch to a 2-year planning process. So throughout those ongoing efforts, we continuously coordinate with members and identify what type of needs we need throughout the region. And as Jamie mentioned early on, that as we move through identifying those needs, we typically coordinate with ADOT and FHWA, identify if they're aligned with those requirements. And we get feedback from many of our members along the way on what the needs are. So for example, on the transit side, we coordinate directly with Suntran and staff at the city to make sure that the transit planning elements include the needs of the region. On the RMAP side, that's the one that we're just beginning the process, and we have 4 years to complete that. So that's another opportunity to continue to go back and coordinate with our members to identify what the needs are when it gets to actual updating of any data and any information we want to acquire, updated data, and Josh can touch on that a little bit more. So that's very extensive. All that information is obviously not in the OWP, but that's the process that begins shortly after. And then finally, as we coordinate with ADOT and FHWA, we get feedback from them on what's eligible, what's required. So Josh, if you don't mind, touch a little bit on additional coordination with all the committees to update data. I think that's critical.
Yeah, very, very much so. You mentioned having finished the 4-year process for the long range plan and update, and then immediately starting the next one. And that's exactly what we're doing and preparing in Sue's efforts with the ABM and getting that, and that migrating off of that from a TDM to the ABM is very important to give us that new capability to ask better questions about the e-commerce and telework components and behavioral changes that just that resolution didn't exist on the demand side. in our modeling efforts. But kind of prior to that, as an input for the modeling exercise, is the land use component as well, and preparing the content and continuing that update of information from cultivating the building permits and processing that work, and working with AOEO and reporting that out and getting our annual estimates, and then looking at those out year projections that will be taking place through the PopTech committee. And so getting the sub-county projections approved, and we'll be looking at a December 23 approval of the county projections end of December, and then rolling that into the sub-county breakdown through the PopTech committee. So that's a pretty big exercise that didn't really get touched on. That's critical for looking at what's that socioeconomic, what's our understanding of those out year densities and distributions of population and jobs in our region based on the adopted plans and policies. So that's a big component. As it relates to some of the example, those are big components to some of the effort that Hinsu presented here. As it relates to some of the data applications that I was sharing with the, starting with the safety, that that goes through our TSSS committee. That information presented to them, and those are the majority of the users are at that operational level, and so we're getting feedback from them and stepping through that exercise. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I may have gone.
No, I was just going to make sure that that we clarify that the OWP itself is outcome driven. So we identify goals, and then once the OWP is adopted, that's where Josh and Hansu and the team start implementing and trying to achieve those outcomes. So Josh is talking about those steps that we'll follow.
Correct, through the committee structure.
If I may, this is Artemio. I yet to hear an answer yet to Carmine's question. So I guess, I appreciate the presentations from Josh and then the second presentation. And I guess we're talking about the overall work program, right? Just one piece. And I think my problem, my question is, what actual input was given by jurisdictions? What input did Pasquayaki tribe provide to the overall work program? There's, with Jamie's presentation, there's multiple items in there. It's a $26 million overall program, and I have no idea what those other programs are. None of those were presented. So I guess I'm asking, today, we're being asked to approve the overall work program. We were given 2 presentations last minute, but why in March, why in April, why weren't the other programs presented to where we can ask questions in advance? And I've been attending these management committees recently. I know that when I agree to participate in these committees, I'm going to set aside time. I'm going to overview things, look at things. I'm going to set time aside to do these committee meetings, but these meetings are going 20 minutes long, 15 minutes long, 30 minutes long. We're zipping right through. And, for me personally, hey, I could have sat down and listened to some presentations for the upcoming draft of the overall work program and find out exactly what PAC is doing. And I guess I can't understand why that has gone away. I thought that was a process that worked. We were included, we got to ask questions, we got to tweak things. I don't see that anymore. And then another question is, was this even presented to TPC? I guess that's rhetorical because I know that it wasn't. And so I'm just confused about all this. It's a great program. The 2 presentations, I think those are awesome. Those are great. But I want to know more, you know. That's my comment. I know there's a couple of questions in there, but I just wanted to get that out there.
Mr. Chair, if I may, as Jamie mentioned early on, the overall work program builds on continuation of previous years. So a lot of the information that you see in the OWP has already been underway by regional council action in previous years. If there are any new items, obviously those are things that we typically spend a little bit more time on new items, but everything you see in the OWP is building on regional council approved OWP from previous years. And we continue to try to enhance and build on our capability. So there's nothing new in there, but obviously we want opportunity for everyone to take a look at, provide feedback. The draft OWP was provided to the regional council at their retreat. We've had some feedback from some of the members since then, and this is the opportunity today to get more feedback, keeping in mind that ultimately it's a grant from ADOT and FHWA and FTA. It is in compliance with what they're looking for as well, and this is an opportunity for you all to give us hopefully any feedback on what else we should be looking at. As I mentioned earlier, it's outcome driven. We're looking at what outcomes we can accomplish. It is not, specific enough at this time that it doesn't mean that we can't continue to receive feedback and adjust and make sure that those outcomes are what we're looking for.
So I guess the answer to was input given by jurisdictions for this particular 2-year program. The answer is no.
The answer is it's building on previous OWP. There's nothing new. So by previous action of regional council, we're continuing to build on that previous direction by regional council. At the retreat, again, it was provided. There was not a lot of discussion on it at the retreat. But again, previously we've had input from, I believe, Suntran. Tucson staff had requested for some transit studies. Those are new, those are included. There is not a lot of new things in here. It's all building on previous regional council direction.
And when you say regional council input, because 2 years ago, it was on the consent agenda and approved. Is that going to happen again this year where it's all right? We at the retreat, there was some comment, not too much, but if it moves on from our committee, it's going to go to regional council. Is it going to be consent?
No, typically the OWP is an action item. We present to the regional council and request for their approval. OWP is not on the consent. Typically, there's an opportunity for regional council to provide additional feedback as well.
And then specifically for the work program, I guess, the last 2 years I've been seeing this economic development program. I don't know what it is, but then I also noticed there was no Clean Cities program, and for the tribe, with the pandemic, with what happened in Texas, with the winter storms, one of the things we've been actively been looking at is climate resiliency, just self-determination for the tribe. So for a program like Clean Cities, that's something that we were looking at, partnering with, looking at, and I just realized there's not a Clean Cities program anymore. But yeah, there's an economic. So I guess if I would have had more time, I would to talk with PAG and talk about, okay, why do we have an economic development program per se, but not a clean cities program? But we're here today asked to approve this thing. And so there's just not enough time when we're just being told now of what's in the program.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Mr. Artemi, I'll be happy to respond to both of those. So the Economic Vitality Committee is a committee of both public and private sector folks. And there's definitely a link to transportation planning. We've been trying to hopefully encourage private sector folks to be more involved through the Economic Vitality Committee. That is an ongoing effort. As far as the grant money goes for the clean cities, we had a proposal from the Clean Cities folks that requested for matching those grant funds, and we did not have any match to provide that match. As a result, we are working directly with statewide partners, and that's been very successful. Actually, our team, Dustin, Paul might be able to add a little bit more to that. We did a statewide project, and PAG was the lead on that. ADOT was a partner, and it was very successful. The grant that was from the Clean Cities, that was roughly about $50,000 a year. It's a volunteer program, and they wanted us to basically match it. And we reviewed their proposal, and as Jamie mentioned early on, it was not deemed something that was financially sound proposal. It's a completely volunteer program. I recall at the time, I believe it was Mary Jacobs and Mr. Udall and a couple other folks that chimed in as well. And the consensus was that the proposal was not reasonable. And on the advice of our attorney, we decided not to accept that grant.
All right, I have a couple of hands up, but before I move to Mr. Ortega first and then Mr. Kessler, I want to make sure that Mr. Debonis and Mr. Hoyas, if you have any additional questions relative to or follow-up questions to your initial questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question, and it may help all of us as we go through this process, not only this cycle, but in future cycles. During the TIP discussion, we were shown a graphical display of the timeline and the numerous points of interaction and outreach and feedback. And that would be helpful to receive on the OWP processes as well, to understand where it starts, how it moves through the various stages, and what the end point is. So I just make that as an ask for information that can come back to us separately to help us understand where those opportunities for jurisdictional input are. And just another comment, I appreciate building on prior year's plans. I think as we've all seen recently, things can change and change rapidly. So there needs to be an input portal for addressing changing circumstances. So that's really it on that topic. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hoyas, any follow-up regarding your questions?
No, I mean, you know, I don't intend to come to these meetings and stir the pot, but it's just, you know, it just feels like we're rubber stamping numerous times the TIP, the OWP, without just having that clear information in advance. You know, I no longer participate in the planning committee, TPC, but you know, the tribe's representative, you know, I talk to him and ask him, are there any meetings? You know, are you getting any information? And he's like, you know, he has no idea. And I just think it's a shame that we're not, you know, just having these meetings to fully disclose on what's going on at PAG. you know, with the TIP, with the OWP. You know, there's great projects, there's great programs, but, you know, still, I think there still needs to be true, in my opinion, true jurisdictional input and transparency where all of us get involved. Because I can say for the tribe, we're not involved at all. You know, I'm just here to, you know, have a vote and say a few things, and that's it. But outside of this, I don't hear anything from PAC. But that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ortega.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess, you know, and I won't rehash the comments that were made by both Artemio and Carmine, but it just seems to me that at least I'm not comfortable making this recommendation given the concerns that both have been raised as well as that I have. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better to send this back to TPC for more of the discussion and some more input before it's presented back to us and then ultimately to the regional council. I really think that there needs to be more discussion. I know Mr. Mogini, you mentioned that our folks have been involved in that. I think it was just the transit piece. I don't know that the TPC discussion has really occurred the way it maybe should have. And by the way, I think we all do our budgets, so we know how we build from year to year, and I understand that. Matter of fact, don't really even disagree with that. But I think that there needs to be a process by which you can explain how it does build on previous years. And then back to Carmine's point, you know, it is a new day, and so how do we make adjustments? So, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that we send this back to TPC, you know, kind of go back through that process. Hopefully there's an opportunity to do that, to at least address some of these concerns. You know, I do have some comments that I can share in writing. Happy to do that. But I think trying to do this, quite frankly, feels rushed. And I think it would be of value to pause for a bit and send it back. And maybe it might come back exactly the same as what we see today, but it might not. So that would be my suggestion. And when appropriate, I would even make that recommendation as a motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah,
So
hold on, just 1 second. Thank you, Mr. Ortega, and Mr. Kessler, we'll get to you in just a minute. Mr. Mohimi, in response.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to remind everyone that the OWP is the overall program for all the programs. The Transportation Planning Committee is not delegated for that responsibility. Obviously, there is a transportation planning component to the plan, but there are other components to the plan, and that's why it typically is management committee level review and recommendations, and then ultimately regional council. Again, as a reminder, it is intended to be a grant from ADOT FHWA, and ultimately we want to make sure that we comply with their requirements as well. So it's more of a collaboration with FHWA, FTA, ADOT to bring a proposal to the table. And as I mentioned, typically it's management committee and regional council that provide any additional feedback, and we'll be happy to receive any suggestions you have. If you see something in there that you see that needs to be modified, be happy to do that. Please do send those to us. But again, as a aspirational goal document, those are the type of things we're looking for. The actual day-to-day operational stuff, those are all still flexible, and we're able to adjust to make sure that we meet those goals.
Thank you, Mr. Mohimi.
This is Artemio, but I guess, but isn't that the problem here, is the all or nothing?
Okay, Mr. Hoyos, Mr. Hoyos?
Yes.
If we can just get to Mr. Kessler a minute, and then if you have a question, I'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kessler?
Thank you, Chair, and everybody else. And please pardon my my non-knowledge in this because I'm sitting in for Ms. Jacobs today. It's my understanding that this complete process is actually shepherded through the budget process for the TMC. And that most of these, I don't want to call them mundane, but the OWP is the general work plan that has been going on for quite some time now. As Mr. Mogami has said, and I want to agree with everything that Mr. DeBonis said, that these are things that we have been working on for quite some time. And I've been in contact with my member of the TPC, and we're correct. It doesn't go to the TPC, but it's again, it's a chance to look at these things through the budget process. I'm just curious, is that not happening? Do we not have an opportunity to look at it already?
Sure, Mr. Chair and Mr. Kiesler. As part of the TIP process, that's the budgeting side of the equation. So the proposed TIP was reviewed and recommended by TPC as well as the management committee. So yes, the budget side of the equation was included in the TIP. Is that what you were wondering about?
Yes, that was you. Yeah, no, you answered. You confirmed what my previous knowledge on this subject.
Yes, and again, just to expand on that, you're 100% correct. The budgeting side is through the TIP process that went through the whole outline that you mentioned earlier. That's the budget side. This is purely goals and objectives document, and hopefully identifying what outcomes we're looking for. And as I mentioned earlier, and Josh touched on it, the actual day-to-day operations, that goes through a variety of working groups and committees. That's really where the rubber meets the road. Between here and the next 2 years, we're able to deliver those outcomes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler, Mr. Mohimi. I have a couple of people who have hands up, but I think Mr. Hoyas started in with a question or a comment, so I'll come back to Mr. Hoyas now. Artemio?
Did I unmute? Okay, there we go.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, as I was saying, it's just, and I think that's the problem here is, we're at this meeting and we're being instructed that this is the do all. If we don't approve this now, we're gonna mess everything up, and that's what and I guess that's the problem. If we're presented with all this information beforehand, if any of us had any questions and input, or we can deal with that beforehand, not all right now today, and that's why, as a planning organization, this should be planned out accordingly. And I don't know if many of you know, I used to work for PAC. I worked for PAC for 3 years. I worked on the OWP. I worked for ADOT. I used to oversee the OWP for TIGO. I used to oversee the OWP for CAC. And I've never, ever in my lifetime seen it managed this way through a process, because this sort of thing happens. And so, again, I'm not here just to stir the pot and cause trouble. It's just, it makes no sense the way that it's being done right now. And that's why I'm speaking up.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Sure.
Our ADOT representatives, FHWA and FTA representatives, they all had a chance to review and comment. They provided their comments. Those comments were included in the draft that you've had for a week. We have not received any comments from anyone since the draft was provided for your review and comment. Again, the ADOT representatives that work with us closely have been very supportive of the goals and outcomes that are outlined in the program. And I guess that's what I'm hoping to hear from you all. Are there any things in the OWP that you would like to see as outcomes and goals for the future?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Go
ahead.
And again, just to rebut what Farhad is saying is, I have no idea, because I have no idea what the programs are offering. I don't have a comment or input because I have no idea what specifically they're going to be doing in the next 2 years. A lot of these programs have existed, you know, OWP after OWP, but each program has new goals, new objectives, and I have no idea what they are for the next 2 years. Again,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, just to clarify. So the document itself for each work element, which Jamie touched on, there are 18 different work elements. Each work element has goals identified and steps to achieve those goals. So I just want to be clear, make sure everybody had a chance to review that document.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mohimi. Okay,
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this is Kelly.
Yes, Mr. Udall.
This is Kelly Udall from Sahuarita. Sahuarita really has no problem with the content of the current OWP, but what I'm hearing from the management committee members is maybe not so much concern of the content, although there's a question of that with some, but maybe it's just process questions. I think Mr. Ortega said it right, that maybe we just need to delay this vote a little bit and have an opportunity for PAC staff to have another conversation with some of the committee members that are struggling through this, so that we can bring it back with a little more confidence in a vote that would ultimately go to the regional council. So I think that's the way I'd lean as well. Although I don't have a problem with the content, it sounds more like it's the process of how we have input into the OWP that is really at question here. So that'd be my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Udall. I did have a couple of hands up from Mr. Ortega and Mr. Debonis, but I don't see them any longer. Did you still have comments or questions?
I think what happens is you get timed out if your hand's up long enough. No, I'm kidding.
Your arm got tired? Is that what you're saying?
Tired, man. So we just put our hand down. So, you know, so here's the deal. And I think, and by the way, I mean, I didn't realize you worked for PAG and ADOT and the whole bit. So thanks for, I think we all came to a similar conclusion here. And again, we're trying to do what's right for everybody, right? All our partners, and trying to figure out how all this works. And I think part of the challenge is when our electeds are asking for a recommendation on this, and they start grilling us and asking us, and we're ill-equipped to have that discussion because it hasn't been fully, I'll call it fully vetted, you know, then it becomes a challenge. And, you know, I know that we always try to get consensus and everybody on the same page. And that's hard to do, you know, in the environment where you know, some of the concerns have been voiced. So I would suggest, and I would do it in the form of a motion when appropriate, that we send it back to TPC, recognizing that TPC isn't, you know, the overall work plan is not specific to transportation, you know, components. But I do think that extra set of eyes gives us an opportunity to at least say, hey, you know what, some technical folks looked at this, and they're able to weigh in and give us some recommendations on that. So that would be my suggestion. And I realize that does throw, as like Tamio said, you know, probably throws a wrench in this thing, but I do think that there could be value there. It's my opinion. So that would be I'm not comfortable sending it forward with a recommendation, at least not for me. I'm happy to provide my commentary, but I would almost prefer that it go back to TPC, let them talk through some of these issues and then bring it back to us. So that's my suggestion to the group. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Mohimi, can you just tell us how that would affect, what that process would look like if we did roll out something, if a motion was made and approved, similar to what Mr. Ortega is describing, what the timing of that would look like, getting it back to the TPC for their review, input, discussion, and then coming back to us. If you could just talk about that real briefly before we go to Mr. Debonis.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the next meeting of the Regional Council is scheduled for May 27th. Typically, the agenda is prepared and sent out to them the week ahead of time. So there's very little time to take it to another committee at this point, but would be happy to do that with an understanding that we may want to still take it to the Regional Council for their review and discussion as well. So it'll be an opportunity for them to see it for a second time. They've already seen it once at the retreat. As I mentioned, I have not received any comments from anyone based on the management committee packet, based on the regional council packet. So I'd be happy to make any adjustments if you like, if you want to send us your recommendations between now and when we go back out to the regional council as well. But other than that, really, I think what I'm hoping for is to understand if there's anything in the document that anyone wants to discuss. Not quite sure what aspect of the goals and objectives are maybe not consistent with what you like to see, but I think even if we take it back to any other committee, they would like to know what aspect of it is hopefully of interest to discuss more as well.
And I think that's a good point. The materials with the goals, the objectives, it's outlined in the packet. And so I don't know if there's specific things that people want to speak to relative to that, because I think that is relevant. If we're sending it back to somebody saying it's either not complete or doesn't have enough information or there wasn't enough input, I'm still a little bit confused on some of that. But if somebody perhaps wants to help me out on that, I'll give you a chance to think about that here a minute while I go to Mr. Debonis.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. And my comment was along the lines of a suggestion to the question you just asked, even prior to you asking it. There are a number of items that I was going to raise as questions today on the OWP and how things tick in and tie together. So, for example, what are the actual expenditures that have occurred compared to the budgeted amount? How does the OWP align with the TIP? Things very specific of that nature, changes in funding amounts. But what I would suggest is that each of the jurisdictions provide their written input and questions, and I think that can be done relatively quickly, and that would serve as the framework for informing any subsequent committee conversations about the OWP. So, I think for Pima County, we'd be prepared within less than a week's time to submit written input along the lines of the notes that I had of specific areas to raise today. So that would be my suggestion, that we do ask the jurisdictions to submit written comments and get it in within a date certain, so that at least that can be available for any subsequent committee discussions that may occur on this prior to it then moving through the process at a subsequent time.
So, Mr. Chair, I think that would be really helpful to us to have those specific comments in writing. I would request to send it to us hopefully as quickly as possible. And
I'm going to suggest.
We'll
I'm-
definitely respond to those and include those in the regional council discussion as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And thank you, Chris. Chris, that's your brother. Sorry, Carmine. But I appreciate it. I think we're on the same page here. And I agree with Mr. Mohimi. I think these comments need to get in as quickly as possible. I don't know what that looks like if close of business by the end of this week is doable. I think that would, I realize that's time-wise, you got basically 2.5 days to get there. But I think if people have reviewed this and you already have your thoughts and your questions, I don't know why we wouldn't be able to get that. And I think that speeds the process up enough, hopefully, to get them the information so they can move forward. And we have a couple more hands up here. So I'll go to Mr. Ortega next, and then to Mr. Kessler.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. We can definitely get our comments in by the end of the week. I think that's fair. But I'm just concerned about about having a recommendation going from this group without more discussion at TPC, or at least having the opportunity to really have a little more dialogue for those folks. But we can get our comments in. That's no problem. No sweat.
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. Mr. Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't hear an answer to the question that was posed earlier. That was, what are the repercussions of if we stopped it right now and the process didn't move forward to the board on the 27th? I didn't hear an answer for that. And then secondly, I like the approach of the comments, and the Oro Valley can certainly provide our comments by the end of the week. Would we be able to share and see everyone's comments? I think that would be helpful for that discussion moving into the next board meeting.
Sure, if I may, definitely we would welcome those comments, and we'll develop a response to all the comments. Even as a result of those comments, we can make adjustments to the draft OWP before it goes to regional council. So that would be our goal. As far as timing, this is a grant award by ADOT on behalf of FTA and FHWA. We do like to have that recommendation by regional council at the May meeting. They do not have another meeting scheduled before the end of the fiscal year. So by the May 27th meeting, we do like to have a recommendation to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mohami. That's really the question I had is that do we risk this money if for any reason that we have to slow things down?
Obviously, there's always a risk. So really the question becomes, how can we have a productive conversation on what you like to see as goals and objectives, so we don't even get to that point? I believe regional council will be able to give us sufficient direction at that time to make changes to the OWP as needed. Again, I have not heard any specific concerns about any goals and objectives, and I think that's really where the question is, that it's more of a goal setting exercise, and hopefully if we need to make adjustments in that goal setting, we'll have time to do that between now and May 27th.
Thank you, Mr. Mohimi. And we have another hand up from Mr. Hoyos.
And Mr. Kiesler, just to make a comment with your question, is I'm going to emphasize we should never be put in this position to ask that question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoyos. All right, any further discussion? Mr. Ortega, I think that you were interested in making a motion. Did you want to take a stab at that at this point, based on all the discussion and information we have at this point?
Yeah, so my motion is real simple. I would just suggest that we send this back. First of all, everybody get their comments in by Friday, close of business. I think that's fair. If you have comments or concerns, we get them back to the staff by the end of the week, close of business on Friday. And then I would like to see the entirety of the conversation back in front of TPC with the recommendation back to this group. And hopefully that can all occur before I think the meeting is the 27th. I think that's what I heard. So that would be my recommended motion. That'd be my proposed motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to table this item with comments back to Mr. Mohimi by close of business Friday, and for staff to take those comments, incorporate them into the presentation and return to this body for further discussion and approval. Do I have a second? Yes. Yep.
Just a piece of that I think is important. I would like to see, at least from my end, I'd like to see the TPC have an opportunity to look at that as a group once the comments are incorporated, just to give us that extra opportunity for some feedback, just an extra set of eyes, which I think could be of value there. That's my suggestion. So that's a tweak to what you read. So if you're okay with that, Mr. Chairman, then that would be my motion.
I am fine with that.
I second that with the tweak.
Amended as noted, and we have a second. Any further discussion?
This is Kelly. It's not a further discussion on the motion, but rather that we ask PAG to look at the process, the process that got us here, and let's change that up so that we don't have this problem again the next time we do this.
Very good. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. The motion to table comments to staff by close of business Friday, with those comments going to the TPC for their review and return to this body as soon as possible, practical, before it goes to regional management. That is the last and final item on the agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. And we are adjourned. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.